Welcome to the Turkey Bowl 100 podcast. I'm Nelson Coffin with my co-host John Stewart, and we'll be talking all things Turkey Bowl. That is the football game between Calvert Hall College and Loyola Blakefield, played every year since 1920, and which will be celebrating its 100th anniversary on November 28, 2019, Thanksgiving morning. As we approach that landmark meeting between these two longtime arch rivals, we thought it'd be a good idea to hear from two of the people who have made the Thanksgiving Day game such a valued tradition. By the way, the game has been played on Thanksgiving every year since 1929, so the first 9 editions of this series were not played on Thanksgiving. Anyhow, John and I are thrilled to have two of the most iconic, long-tenured, and successful coaches in the history of the series, Joe Bruno from Loyola Blakefield and Calvert Hall College's Augie Miceli. Joe Bruno, who coached the Dons for 35 years, won 212 games overall and 5 Maryland Scholastic Association A-Conference championships. In 35 Turkey Bowls, Coach Bruno won 18 and lost 17. Augie Miceli has coached football and taught math at Calvert Hall for 59 years, 12 as head football coach and many more years as an assistant football coach. He also coached the junior varsity football team for many years. His Calvert Hall varsity football teams won 104 games, claimed 6 MSA A-Conference titles, and he was 9 up and 5 down in 14 Turkey Bowls. Coach Bruno and Coach Miceli, we're honored to have both of you guys here. Thanks for making time for us. My co-host John Stewart played football for the Dons and was an assistant football coach under Joe Bruno from 1967 to 77. Moreover, John played on the first Loyola lacrosse team and coached the Dons varsity lacrosse team to 2 MSA Conference championships. John was the Dean of Students at his alma mater for 33 years, taught math for 14 years, and is still a fixture at Blakefield as an assistant to the president. John, let's start with any questions or comments you might have for the coaches.
Yeah, my first question is for Coach Weibel. Having coached with Joe Bruno for many years, we had some difficulty with the Delaware wing T. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you became interested in employing that as your primary offense, and then tell us about your passing game off of that, which was almost non-existent in sometimes, and some of your better players at running back. Here's Coach Augie Miceli.
The way we got into the wing T was Joe Carlos's last year as head coach. I was his defensive coordinator, and we were doing well, and we had a good season, and the defense was quite strong. And we played St. John's High School from Washington, another LaSallian school, and they came over here and just kicked our butts. And they ran the wing T, and we could not understand. All the defensive players were coming out of the game telling me what they were doing, and of course we didn't know how to stop it. We did not get the scouting report that we should have had to prepare for the game, and after viewing the film, when I became head coach, I decided I was going to run that offense, so I went up to Delaware to learn it.
Okay, that was Coach Tubby Raymond, correct? Up at Delaware?
Tubby Raymond was the head coach. Irv Wisniewski was the offensive line coach. Irv gave me more time and taught me the Delaware more so than Tubby. But I used to spend a lot of time up there. I would leave school when they were in spring practice. When they were in spring practice, I would leave Calvert Hall about 2:45. Jump in my car and drive to Delaware for their practice session that began around 4 o'clock. And I would be on the field with those coaches until the practice was over. And I would do that at least 2 or 3 times a week during their spring practice.
Okay.
That's how I got to learn the offense.
Well, the offense is predicated on what we called Eyewash and Deception. And we always taught our defensive players, if I remember correctly, to follow the guards. There wasn't too much of a passing attack off of that attack, was it? Your Delaware wing T, Was it? And if you had a quarterback who was adept at throwing off of that, who was that?
Joby Walt had the best record as a passing quarterback. I think, if I remember correctly, he threw for 1,200 yards his senior year. But he threw to John Clark, Jerry Clark, excuse me. He threw to Jerry Clark, our wide receiver, and Jerry caught the ball and ran for about 1,000 of those 1,200 yards. Jerry ran a 4.4 40, 4.4 4.5 40, and you just couldn't cover him with one person. So we would put our strength into the sideline. If we were on a hash mark, right hash mark, we would put our wide receiver to the left side, and we would run our strength into the boundary. And most teams don't like to defend strength; they want to defend wide field. So we were able to run the ball into the boundary, unless they put another man over. And then when they put another man over, that would leave Jerry Clark one-on-one, and that was the reason it worked so well.
Good. I know we had a tough time defending it. Coach Bruno, I'm going to pass the mic over to you. I know that you, having worked with you, were reluctant to drop back pass for a while until you had, I think Bernie Bowers was your first drop back passer, maybe in '78. Talk to us a little bit about your offensive philosophy and where you were schooled fundamentally. I know George Young was primary influence, so Coach Bruno.
Actually, in talking about Augie's wing tee, what made it difficult was that nobody else ran that offense, and so you couldn't get very well prepared for it. I would compare that to the success that Navy has had the past few years with their offense, which is probably a hybrid of the wing tee. But in addition to the difficulty of the offense itself, I think at that time Augie had some mighty fine players, particularly some really good, strong running backs that were exactly what you had to have to make that offense successful. And our offensive philosophy was to try to keep the ball away by just playing ball control offense, but it's difficult to do when the defense outmans you. So we were in for some rough times there in the '70s.
Coach Bruno, you lost one year 56-14 to Augie, and then 35-0 the following year. So those were some of the. I guess my question is, losing like that, is it tougher that way, or was it tougher to lose a close game?
Losing 56-14 is tough. I didn't get over that. I probably haven't gotten over it. Okay, and then come back the following year and have them return a kickoff and end up 35-0. They were some tough times, and it was just a challenge to get people back on track.
Well, you did a great job of that, Coach. But you know, in your 35 years, 35 Turkey Bowls, what's the highlight for you? And you know, what are the more memorable games for you?
Oh, a lot of memorable games. One year, Pete Legler scored 4 touchdowns in the first quarter, I believe, was a highlight. Funniest game was '89 when
Brad
we
Hoy?
had to wait for the snow to get cleared off, and we weren't doing anything on offense. Bill Carew in the fourth quarter said, "Run this belly play with T.J. Oler." T.J. Oler probably all year long only carried the ball about 10 or 11 times, and he took the ball 40-some yards. I can remember that.
That's after you guys, Brad Hoig had run in the first quarter, I think, an 89-yard sweep, and you scored. Then on your next 7 possessions, I think, you gained like a total of 20 yards.
Yeah.
You had nothing. So then Calvert Hall went ahead at the end of the game, and you got the ball back, I think, with 4 minutes left, something like that. You hadn't put together a drive the whole game, really. Hoig had scored on that long run. That's about all you had done. And then you ran that series with T.J. Oler, was it?
Yeah.
Wow. So so we credit Bill Carew for that?
Definitely. He was the one that suggested the play.
Well,
And it was a play we didn't use very often.
speaking of an iconic coach, Bill is still coaching at Loyola, as I understand
Yes,
it, as an assistant.
yes, he is.
Augie, let's
Yes.
go back over to you for memorable. Who called the Garrick McPherson reverse in 1983? You faced a undefeated Loyola team that year. Loyola took the lead. A few minutes left to go in the game, and take it from there.
Well, we're on the sidelines doing a TV timeout after Loyola had just scored, and there was a minute 39 seconds left on the clock, something like that.
That's right.
And we're having a discussion amongst the coaches of what to run. And someone said we have to run this, and someone else said we have to run this. And over the headset, my coach up in the stand says, "Let's run the reverse on the kickoff." Well, the truth of the matter is we didn't have a reverse as such that we used in games. But every Monday in practice, we would run a kickoff reverse so that our kickoff team would be prepared for it. The first time we ran it in practice, we went for a touchdown. After that, we never gained much yardage on it. But we did run a reverse in practice, but we never used it, never had it in our so-called playbook. So when I got the message, so to speak, run the reverse, I said, that's it. Because we had never run it. No one had ever seen us run it. I said, we're going to run the reverse. And all my coaches were against it. I said, we're going to run the reverse. And then somebody said, well, we can't. They know what we're going to do because we've taken so long discussing this. And I looked over to the other side of the field. I said, they don't know what we're going to do because they're still celebrating their touchdown. I said, and I called McPherson over. McPherson came over, and I said, what did you call? He said, return middle. I said, go back and call the reverse. He says, call the reverse? He says, Coach, we don't have a reverse. I said, we run it every Monday in practice. He says, oh, that reverse. I said, yes, go run that reverse. So he goes back in, huddles them up, calls the reverse. We ran it. I think he took it down to the 3. He would have probably scored had he not had a slight injury to his ankle. And he took it down to the 3. We were able to punch it in and kick the extra point. And I don't remember what the score was, but we did win the game.
15-14?
15-14, right.
Yeah.
So we did practice a reverse, but not for us to run. We practiced it for our defense more than anything else.
Okay. And over to Joe Bruno now. Joe, I think you had a very good passing quarterback named Dan DeLay in the early 70s. And he got hurt right before the Loyola Calvert Hall game, and you had to come up with a skinny sophomore quarterback named Tom Bender. Take us through that game.
Tom did not really resemble a quarterback as a sophomore, but he was extremely tough, and I guess that was a typical Bruin offense. We just ran the ball. Franny Wigman was a fullback. I think Franny weighed about 160 pounds, and he ran for over 100 yards that day. And as the game wore along, the momentum started to go in our favor.
So Tom was a sophomore that year, and Dan went on to Towson University, I think, to play. But Tom continued to play for next 2 seasons for you, right?
Yes.
All right, Coach. So in the infamous, to Loyola people, the 69 game, the Phil Marsiglia field goal, 42 yards. What were your thoughts, Coach, when Coach Carloza sent him? Now, let's see, was the score tied? Yeah, the score was tied at that point. You guys had the ball. My understanding is you guys had the ball at midfield. I think you ran a 4th down play from midfield. You were going for a 1st down instead of kicking it, making them go farther. So I guess you had to defend that decision later. But there were 40 seconds left when they got the ball, something like that. It wasn't much. And so what they got down, I guess, the quarterback, Phil Popovic. He completed a pass. They got down there probably to 30 or something like that, 25. There's 4 seconds left or something like that. They send Marsiglia out. Were you thinking maybe they're going to fake it? What were your thoughts?
Well, the first thought would go back to we had the ball on
Right.
4th down and tried to get a 1st down
Right.
and kill the clock. You got to remember at that time it was unheard of for a high school kid to kick a field goal.
That's right.
Matter of fact, I don't think he kicked many extra points in those days. So, to be honest with you, field goal was a kind of one of the farthest things from my mind. What was my reaction when they kicked the field goals? Well, I just lined up a team and got off the field. As a matter of fact, Paul Baker, the ex-basketball guru, wrote me a note the next day praising how wonderfully my kids handled themselves afterwards, but I think we were all in shock.
I was going to say, because it must have been disbelief on your part. The fact that I understand the kick was pretty, not only accurate, but would have gone even
Could have gone 10 more yards.
Yeah.
Yeah, went right through the middle.
Yeah.
Kept flying.
Well, Phil Marsiglia told me that he was as surprised as anyone when Coach Carloza told him to get out there on the field and that he could make it. Coach Miceli?
Yes, I was a JV coach, and it's our custom that on the day before a game, the team that's playing could go on the main field for their pregame practice. So JV played on Thursday, so every Wednesday I would go up to the main field, and the varsity would not be on the main field. The only person on the main field was Phil Marsiglia, and he would practice kicking by himself. He had like about a dozen footballs, I think, a kicking tee, and he would practice kicking, and no one was up there with him. He would just put it on a tee and kick it, and he kept kicking. And I would go up with the JV team, and I would watch him kick the ball on kickoffs, and I would watch him kick it on field goals. And I knew how well he could kick. And Coach Carloza wasn't really an advocate of kicking extra points, and he absolutely did not know how well Phil could kick the ball. So when he sent him in the game, he sent it in just because somebody said he can kick. And he said, go ahead in and go in. So I told the people up in the press box that he could make this. They didn't believe me. Well, when that ball went through the uprights, everyone in the stadium was surprised because, as Coach Bruno said, back then kicking a field goal in high school was unheard of from that distance, let alone extra points.
Coach, let me follow up on the Garrick McPherson play as well. By the way, was it Shawn Lyles? Because Loyola kicked away from Garrick. Garrick had run one back earlier in the game, I believe. Either a punt or
he ran the punt back.
Yeah, ran for a touchdown for first score, right?
Okay.
So I'm sure Loyola was aware of Garrick McPherson, who went on to play at Boston College.
Boston College, yeah.
So he was a pretty highly regarded player. So I believe was it Shawn Lyles? Do you know who actually handed the ball off to him?
You know, I don't recall who handed the ball off to him.
It was Shawn Lyles.
Shawn Lyles was the one.
Who was a pretty good return man in his own right.
You know,
Right.
the irony there is that I had been at City College with Eli Lyles, his father. And Eli Lyles was a super running back. And I mean,
So you had coached Eli Lyles, or you were classmates?
I was a coach at City. I coached Eli when he was on the junior varsity.
I see.
Then was with him for 2 years with the varsity.
So Shawn Lyles gets the ball and starts heading across the field. He hands it off to Garrick McPherson. McPherson cuts around right end, as I remember. I'm in the stands with my father, Calvert Hall class of 27, by the way. And I said, Dad, look at that. My God. And then I saw, I think it was it John Johnson?
Johnny Robinson.
Johnny Robinson.
Johnny
Robinson. We're screaming in the stands, don't catch him.
And that's what I was thinking, catch him, please catch him. And I think he called him at the 4. At the 3, okay. So, you know, that gave Calvert Hall time to kind of, whittle the clock down there. And even so, I think Loyola made a spirited comeback. They got the ball, came back down. I believe Calvert Hall intercepted a pass, but the guy who intercepted the pass fumbled, so Loyola got the ball back again. So you guys still had a shot. I don't know how far it was. I'm going to guess around the 40 or 35, something like that. So how about you, Coach Miceli? Were you thinking about, I hope Garrick gets caught? Or as a coach, you're probably saying, no, I want him to score right away, right?
No, I wanted him to score right away.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. But you still had to kick an extra point there.
That's right.
And I should have the young man's name who and I don't. There was a picture on the paper of him. Do you remember his name? Because he had nerves of steel too. He had to kick that extra point.
And that was the first extra point he kicked all year.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not. He was the backup.
Really?
That's right. I'm trying to
I got to
remember
get his
name.
name. I'll dig it out of here. But we'll talk about it.
My starting kicker was Kirk Miceli.
Yes.
He was punter and place kicker. And Kirk was having a rough time with extra points. And he was doing something wrong.
He went on to kick at UCLA.
Oh, yes, he did. I'll tell you that
he
story
had
too.
pro tryouts too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we scored and we needed the extra point for a win, Coach Shannon got the kicking team ready, and Kirk Miceli grabbed the kicking tee to take out on the field, and I grabbed Kirk. And I said, Kirk, I'm sorry, but you're not going to kick this one. And of course he was crushed. And I sent the other young man in who kicked it right through the middle of the uprights. And we did win the game by 1 point. And as a result, Mr. Maggio, Kirk's father, would not talk to me for quite a while after that game. And eventually he came to me and said, you were right, you did the right thing. He said, but I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to send Kirk to kicking camp this summer, and I also enrolled you to go with him so that you could learn everything he learns. So we went to kicking camp together. And Kirk learned how to punt better and, of course, kick extra points and field goals a lot better. And I learned more about the kicking game than I ever knew. So it worked out real well. And then as a result of, Kirk went to UCLA and was a punter and a kicker, but eventually ended up just punting when someone else was doing the place kicking. And I went to see his final game. Mr. Maggio insisted that I join them for the final game against University Southern Cal. And I went out there and stayed with them over the weekend and saw that last game Kirk played, college game.
Nice story. Kirk also was a quarterback at Calvert Hall.
Yes, he was.
That's what I thought. And
He was my starting
He
quarterback
won you a couple of games.
in my
right?
senior year,
Yeah.
his senior year.
Right.
So
Yeah. Let me ask, this is for both coaches. Because of the import of the game and the venue, and back in the day, you would play at, I guess, Memorial Stadium, and then it was Raven Stadium, PSI Net, or whatever they called it. How difficult was that for you guys to get your teams prepared? First of all, because everybody's talking about the game and it makes your season, that's got to make it tough. And then the second question would be, in the venue, is it tough to communicate? Was the crowd noise an issue, or just the way you signaled in plays or anything like that? Coach Bruno, start with how did you get your team prepared?
Here again, Bill Careau's name comes up. He said to me one year, he said, Joe, I noticed that when we get down to the stadium, the players are more interested in looking around and looking up and down and not very much attentive to the game. He said, I think what we want to do is get there a little early, let them have a tour of the inside of the stadium, and then come back in and get dressed up and ready to play. So I think that began to help us. One thing that I was surprised when we went from Memorial Stadium to M&T, I guess is what it's called today.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised at how intimate M&T Stadium was.
Interesting.
It seemed as if the fans were closer to the field than when we played at Memorial Stadium, and then seemed way off. And of course the facilities were rather plush too, so that was impressive.
So Coach Miceli, any communication problem? Was it crowd noise or any of that kind of stuff? And same thing, was it tough getting the kids their heads out of the clouds before that game?
Well, there may have been some issues there, but getting the team ready to play Thanksgiving, play Loyola on Thanksgiving, and Loyola play Calvert Hall. I mean, it's so deep in tradition. There was no problem, as far as I was concerned, getting the teams up. Not at all. What Coach Bruno just said was true. They really looked forward to playing at Memorial Stadium and downtown at M&T. They really enjoyed that, and I'm sure it was a thrill for them. I can tell you that a couple years back, my grandson Augie was sitting next to my wife, and he said, "Mom," he says, "in 2020, I'm going to be on that field." And he was looking forward when he wasn't even here. So, no, I didn't think there was any problems getting them ready to play.
Well, how about communication problems? Anything like that?
I don't think so.
Crowd noise, nothing?
No, I never had a problem with that.
Okay. For Coach Bruno or Coach Miceli, the game's been on TV now for, I guess, 30 years. It's maybe 20. I don't know how long. But anyhow, it has slowed the game down considerably. Yeah. Coach Bruno just made a face like, you're right. So how does that play in, Coach Bruno? Was that a difficult thing for you as coaches and for the kids?
I think it's more difficult for the coaches than the players, but it does slow the game down, and it really interferes with the rhythm that you're trying to establish. I mean, one of the things you do in practice, you say we're going to practice at the speed that we want to play in the game, and then you get to this game and the speed is totally different. So,
Well put. Yeah, I think that's right. Coach Miceli?
Well, the TV timeouts actually helped me.
Okay.
The game where we ran the reverse and won the game, if we didn't have a TV timeout as long as it was, we may not have called that reverse. So that helped me in that one game.
That's a fair assessment, so kudos to Channel 2. Is that what we're saying here?
Yes.
By the way, the guy who scored the touchdown in the '83 game, do you remember his name? After Garrick ran it down to the
Shawn Lyles.
Chuck Trimble.
Oh, you mean, I thought you meant the reverse.
No. It scored the touchdown. Garrick was caught on the 3. I think they scored on 3rd down. So they ran 2 plays, didn't get in.
I misunderstood your question.
No, I'm sorry, Chuck Trimble.
Right.
And the kid who kicked the extra point, Mike Haskell.
That's it, Mike. Okay. Right.
So, John, do you have any other questions for the
No,
coaches? Comments?
You know, going back to when Coach Bruno started, there was more or less 1 win, 1 loss, 1 win, 1 loss, and then it seemed to go where Calvert Hall ran off a string of 7 or so with Coach Miceli here, and followed by a long string of Loyola wins all through the 90s, I know, maybe with 1 loss in the late 80s. But how about those streak? Did you have a hard time getting guys up to continue the streak? They didn't want to let you down? Coach Miceli.
I don't really remember having any trouble getting them ready to play on Thanksgiving Day. And I can't remember ever getting them ready, having a difficult time getting them ready to play. I just don't recall that.
Well, how was it being on the other side of the shoe on the other foot when Coach Bruno is reeling off 11 straight wins? It had to be pretty depressing. I know as a Calvert Hall fan, it was pretty depressing. I don't know how it was for you guys.
Well, I don't know how many of those losses were mine because
No. But you were an assistant then, or no?
No, you were
No.
a spectator.
Oh, you were. Okay.
I was at Johns Hopkins.
Okay. All right.
I was still teaching here at Calvert Hall, but I was coaching at Johns Hopkins University.
Well, I sit corrected, Coach. Coach Bruno, let's. We've talked about some of your tough losses. How about those 11 years when you guys just even in the close games, the 50-50 games, you guys always seem to come out on top. What was that all about?
I assume it was all about having good players.
Well, take some credit yourself, Coach. I think you guys put together pretty good game plans and so on.
If I think back, we had Welsh boys contributed a lot to the victory, and we had Halls. One of the things they say about this game is it's a family game, and certainly families were important to our football program. And during that period of time, we had some good players.
You certainly did, and you. My understanding is you went to Bucknell, and George Young was one of your. Was he a teammate at that?
No,
he was not a teammate.
He left the year I came.
I see. So talk about your now, George Young. The the intertwining of our two institutions. Like John's brother went to Calvert Hall, and your good friend George Young was a Calvert Hall guy. Talk about his influence on you, and kind of just the culture of the game a little bit.
Quite honestly, I never could have ended up having the success that I had as a coach without George. I mean, everything I know about football, I learned from George. And I was sitting here thinking, and John Stewart mentioned before we got on the air, that George, one of the things he used to say, more games are lost in the kicking game than in every other phase. So you better know how to handle the kicking game. And I think back to those run back kickoffs, and George probably wasn't very happy with me.
Coach, so you were going for 12 in a row against Calvert Hall. The games, we talked about this off mic here, but want to go through it again a little bit. Calvert Hall scores in overtime, sort of on a fluke play. The quarterback was running in. He gets hit. He fumbles. The ball pops in the air. Jason Forrester grabs it, falls over the goal line. They score. They kick the extra point. You guys go on 4th down in your possession in overtime, and I swear your back jumped. But anyhow, he still got in and scored. So it's 7-6. You have a choice there, Coach. You can tie it up and play a second overtime, or you can go for 2. And the Riverboat Gambler, Joe Bruno, went for 2. Can you talk about the play and your mindset and what you were thinking there?
Well, it was a play that we had practiced a good deal in preparation for the game. And thinking back over, it may not have been the smartest play in the world. The quarterback was left-handed, and we ran a play action pass to the left and wanted him to throw back to the tight end, dragging back to the right. Well, the whole thing took too long to develop, and consequently it ended up being a fiasco instead of a victory.
But I always thought, Coach, was there a soft spot in your heart there for George Young when you made that decision? And maybe you thought, this streak has gone on a little too long.
No, I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't think about George at that time.
That's what I kind of figured that. All right. Well, listen, we are about to wrap this up, and I want to thank Coach Augie Miceli and Coach Joe Bruno and my co-host John Stewart for making time here for us for the Turkey Bowl 100 podcast. We appreciate your time, fellas, and thanks for your insights. John, thanks for your help. Appreciate it.
Thank you.